Hi, my name is Penty, and this is a rant about Rogue-Like versus Rogue-Lite, and talking about why Rogue-Lite really shouldn't exist. So it's less of a rant of them versus each other, and just why one term has no point in existing in modern gaming, in my opinion. To do this, I have to sort of explain what the terms that I could find actually meant, what the difference between a roguelike and a roguelite is, and why I find it so dumb that we have these terms to separate these type of games. So first would be roguelike, which is, I would say, is the subgenre of action RPG, or well, RPGs. A roguelike, according to literal definitions, is a game that has grid-based movement. It has turn-based RPG fighting instead of what you might be thinking and what I'm showing in the background. It has every run is new. That's one of the factors of it. It has permadeath, so when you die, the run restarts. And the loot is randomly generated. While Rogue-Lite just has the permadeath, the new runs, and the random items. And sometimes these games have upgrades that you can do through each run to make the run easier. And so another point to make is that these are so dang hard to differentiate anyways, because you'll find different rules for what makes them different. Some will say, oh, roguelikes have a story while roguelites don't, which doesn't seem to be true in the entirety of it. And so it's just overly complicated, and there's no reason that this minor difference should exist. And it's because of the game Rogue that exists. If you didn't catch on, the game Rogue was a turn-based mechanic RPG that was grid-based movement. It had the QWERTY style, so it was like made out of keyboard inputs, so like ones and letters, ones, numbers, letters, dashes, everything you can find on the keyboard. That's how they made the layout. And it was randomly generated, but it spawned a genre of game that got really big. But people, I guess, got so mad about it that they had to coin it roguelite, because they wanted games that were roguelikes to be like exactly like Rogue, to be clones. And that bothers me personally, I guess, because it's just annoying, because it's just confusing too, because I bet $5 most of you couldn't name then a roguelike, and everyone you would name is a roguelite. The closest I can think of that I know is I forgot the name. The tower. You're going up, Slay the Spire. There we go. I don't know how I forgot that, but Slay the Spire is the closest I could think of, but that's a card game instead. And so that's the big point. And another point I can point out is if you look up a roguelite on Google, guess what pops up? Roguelike. Because it's such a subgenre that it doesn't even have its own Wikipedia page, because it's not necessary. And that's the point, is like roguelike is supposed to be similar to Souls-like. It's these key mechanics that you're supposed to recognize, and you can tell someone so they understand what the video game plays like. And when you say roguelike, they're gonna think of games like Hades, Binding of Isaac, Risk of Rain 1 and 2. They're not actually even gonna think of Rogue, probably, the original game, because I think it's too old for most people nowadays to remember, and I don't even think it was that popular. What really brought this term roguelike in the popular eye, as far as I could see, was Binding of Isaac. When it came out, it marketed itself as this roguelike game because it was using these mechanics that they saw in Rogue and thought, oh, that'd be really interesting for an action adventure game where you just go on multiple runs where things are different and you try to beat the whole entire game within that one run, and if you don't, you die. Which spawned many more games leading up to what I think is one of the best games of this year, Hades. Hades is fantastic. It's a perfect example of what should be called a roguelike. But we have these insanely, essentially asinine lengthening of things. It's like if you wanted to name Metroidvanias and suddenly you thought Bloodstain was a little too different, so it was like, oh, it's got to be Metroidvania Light. That seems pointless. The key things that came from Rogue that people like are these new runs every time, permadeath for all your characters, and then the randomly generated items and skills that can make each run more and more entertaining and doesn't make the game feel old after a couple runs. I think these are the main things that they don't put turn-based combat and a grid movement set. These are things that were added because I guess people got so mad that they wanted to be so specific and make this subgenre. Another example of something like this for me is in the Souls community. We have Souls-likes, or as they like to call it, Soulsborne. And when you go in depth, you're like, wait, why did you change the name to Soulsborne? You're like, well, Bloodborne plays a bit differently than Dark Souls. Bloodborne plays pretty much exactly like Dark Souls. It just has a more aggressive movement set. So are we going to call it Soulsborne Sekiro? Because Sekiro plays completely different than Dark Souls and Bloodborne. It has a parry-based system, so thus you wouldn't have the ability to, I guess, put it in that genre, which doesn't make sense. We call it Soulsborne because they have stamina-based systems that are based around dodging different weapons. They're RPGs, action RPGs typically, but they don't have to be, as we've noticed. Like Salt and Sand is a little more unique as a 2D one, and even some games like Cuphead get called the Souls game of their series. Another way to drive this home, why is like the definition of like is having the same characteristics or qualities as something. So it's, as long as it has some of the same characteristics and qualities, it's like it. Bloodborne has a lot of the same characteristics and qualities as Dark Souls, so thus it's a Souls-like. It makes it easier. We have no reason to make these super in-depth definitions that make gaming honestly more confusing, because when you bring up Rogue-Lite, they're confused. They don't know what it means. And I think that's it. It just acts light. There's no reason for it to be Rogue-Lite. Like, see, I can't even get it right in my own video, but you need to be able to differentiate it easier and understand it more. And that's my point. That's my rant, is it annoys me so much because it's not something I've ran into. I don't know someone who's a Rogue-Lite purist. It's just every time you discuss it, they're like, well, is it actually a roguelike or is it a Rogue-Lite? And there's no point. It's a roguelike. You know what I mean when I say roguelike. You think of Binding of Isaac, you think of Hades, you think of Risk of Rain 2, all these new games that came out a while ago, and that have these similar qualities of new runs, permadeath, random items. It's that simple. And I think that's the thing in gaming we need. We need to stop complicating things. We've had Metroidvania. We don't need Metroidvania Bloodstained. I don't know how you would add it, but someone would find a way. You don't need this. It works. Metroidvania works because it tells you what kind of action-adventure game you're going to be getting into. And yeah, so that's my overall rant on this subject, and what I guess another thing really grinds my gears or gets under my skin. It's just ditch the term roguelite. There's no reason for it. There's none. It's just being overly complicated. Roguelite gets the point across. You know what you're getting into, and most people use it anyways. And as a matter of fact, most games that are roguelites use roguelike as a marketing term in their marketing, not roguelite. Anyways, though, thank you for stopping by and watching. If you leave a like or subscribe, that'd be awesome. Other than that, thank you.